Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee for the 10th of September. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor O'Mahony. Councillor Hode is subbing in his place. Councillor Sabi Kang is joining us online tonight.
Thank you. And the minutes, did you just say to me there was an amendment?
Yeah, I noticed two things we want to tweak, members. One was there's a realised with a Z rather than an S in there. And the other one being is, I believe Councillor Alan Ashbury hasn't mentioned that he was in attendance. Let me know if there's any other amendments you'd like to make.
Thank you. That was me sitting here looking for something else. I noticed it, and my spelling is the worst, but I noticed a Z instead of an S. Okay, anyone else got any points on the minutes? Are we happy to agree them? Okay. Okay, so any declarations of interest? Okay, we've got no public questions tonight. Before we start and go to point 5, you've obviously noticed it's a one-item agenda. Before I went away on holiday, literally a day before I went away on holiday, myself and the Chief Exec sat down and worked through the work programme because we needed to do some tweaking. I'm going to let the Chief Exec just outline what the reasoning behind that was.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Councillor Garrett said, we had a meeting to discuss the forward plan for this committee and others, and that stemmed from a group leaders meeting that we had where we were talking about local government reorganisation and the pressures that would place on you as councillors, on certain committees and on officers as well. As a consequence of that, it was agreed that we would need to be a little bit more agile and flexible in the way that we approached forward plans for committees, agendas, and actually be flexible about convening meetings, potentially at late notice, and taking some out of the diary at late notice as well. So apologies in advance if we need to do that, but local government reorganisation at the moment is quite uncertain in terms of its timescale, but it means that we may need to jiggle things around. The logic around the changes to the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee agenda are to simplify things for officers. Ordinarily, we like to tell you about the work that we do. We like to sell our services, and you will find that generally the portfolio holder reports include a huge amount of information. But as a consequence of that, it does take a long time for that information to be compiled and to be effectively constructed into those reports. To free up some resource, because we are getting even now requests from the Project Management Office for information around some of our key services, we felt it was appropriate to remove those portfolio holder reports and put in topic-based reports as well. The premise being that wouldn't diminish the importance of the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee, but it would allow you to focus in on topics that you felt were particularly pertinent or that officers felt were important because they were emerging pieces of legislation or changes in the way we delivered services or any other topical matter. I hope that helps explain to the committee, Chair.
Just off the back of that, so the items we have left put in there were ones that, while we were going through each portfolio, I said were probably ones that we would want to, the phrase these days, deep dive into. But we are going to discuss the work programme, obviously, after the first item. And if there's anything else that, as the committee, you feel you want added, then obviously subject to officer time availability to do that, then we can obviously do that. The idea was we were going to have probably potentially another one item at this meeting, but because of the timescales and the report, it wouldn't have been at the full length it should have been. So that's the reasoning for where we are now. We can discuss it in more length when we get to the work programme. But in the meantime, if we want to go to item 5, which is a complaints monitoring report, I think Ms Kipling is going to be doing the presentation.
Good evening, councillors, and good evening, Chair, and thank you so much for allowing me to present this report to you that has been produced by the customer services team, and it is a really important report because, you know, all organisations receive complaints, but it's the way we manage these complaints that really show how well an organisation is performing. Complaints are a great way to understand the overall health of the council. They provide excellent opportunities for learning and improving, and are therefore a really important part of our continuous improvement. In the last 12 months, our complaints policy has been updated, as the report outlines, to reflect current best practice, and there are now 2 stages to each complaint. Stage 1 is handled by the service manager, and should the complainant wish to take it further, then it's referred to an independent senior officer within the corporate management team. The complaints service is coordinated by our excellent customer services team, and this report has been prepared mainly by Lynn Smith, who I see is also on the call. They ensure that all complaints are properly responded to within the relevant time periods, and I'm really pleased to see that all stage 2 complaints have been responded to within the time period allowed in the policy. This report shows the complaints that the council have considered, and also those that have been referred to and investigated by the local government ombudsman, and we've included their figures in the report for your information. I want to point out that to preserve anonymity, we refer to all complainants in the report as Mr. or Mrs. X. These aren't the same person, although Lynn tells me that we have noticed a trend this year of multiple complaints coming from 3 or 4 regular users of our services. And we believe that it's for this reason we saw a bump in our complaints in December. It's an essential part of council business that councillors have the opportunity to scrutinise this really important part of our performance, and I would very much welcome your questions and feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms Kipping. Okay, so we have the report before us. Have we got some questions? Councillor Malbagadam, then Councillor Wilson.
That's you. That's me.
Thank you, Chair. I got one question. I don't want to prolong this meeting more than what we need to, so I just will stick to one question. Hopefully don't have to come back again. On page number 11, the increase of 11.5% in Q4 in particular. Why is it? Is it unusual? Do you expect this to carry on? What is driving the real increase? I mean, it's very unusual. It's a bit of a jump, but I know it's numbers-wise, it's not a lot. Yeah, 9 to 16, only 7, but it just still doesn't make sense. If you can explain that, that'll be great. Thank you.
I had that note as well, so.
Yes, of course, I'd be delighted to explain this, Chair, and I'm sure Mr. Smith can give further detail as needed. I believe in December we saw a hump of complaints because we had 3 or 4 complainants who submitted multiple complaints. They were all very similar, but we do count them individually as individual complaints, and I believe that is the reason for the increase in that particular quarter.
Not wishing to go too far into that, the person that was, if it was related to one person, was that one of the ones that when we've gone through we had an upheld decision, or was it not, if we know that? Just obviously if it was a repeat offender, was it one thing specifically, or were they complaining about lots of different things?
I'm going to pass to Mrs. Smith to answer that one. She knows the detail behind it.
Good evening, everybody. It was 3 individuals, and at their request, different elements of their concerns were recorded separately. I would say it would be linked around the same case, and to keep it simple and not go into individuals' details, one element of the complaint might be that they didn't agree with the decision, or that they didn't agree with how that decision had been investigated and arrived at, or they didn't feel that we had dealt with either sympathetically or in a timely manner. We try to combine, but sometimes customers and these particular individuals wanted it recorded as separate complaints, and that's why you see the increase. I've alluded to that a little bit in some of the feedback where I've said this is linked to the one above, but it is and there's a wider picture, I would say it was one area of concern, but with different elements of complaint within it.
Okay, and just going back to that again, was it one of the ones that was then upheld or not?
Partially upheld. And where we had found we weren't timely in our response, that was the element that was partially upheld.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baglan.
Just to follow, thank you very much for that. Just to follow, I mean, if you look at quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, is it the same people complaining in all three quarters, all four quarters, or is it the same complaint as well? The person who complains as much as the complaints themselves, are they just getting carried forward and it's been recorded accordingly?
Would you be happy for me to answer that, Sally? The particular clump of repeat complaints all came in December of 24. We aren't seeing any particular trend throughout the year, nor were these individuals complaining throughout the year. Everything that had caused them concern happened sort of November, December time, and the complaints, or multiples thereof, were all received in the December.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I'd like to say something about it later, just a couple of small points that might help. One with members on page 16, near the top, it says wording regarding DHP. I think that refers to discretionary housing payment, and looking into it, it's good that we're improving clarity on that for people. At the bottom of that page on JWS, something I've found a lot when I report fly tipping or anything like that, they take all my contact details, but they never get back to me to say they've, collected the fly tip, which is not something anyone's going to complain about. They complain if they didn't collect the fly tip. They do clear things up, but it would close that loop and help customer service if they just regularly got back to someone and said, yeah, we've done it. And then I think that would improve people's opinion of them. And if I can just make one sort of more general point. So I think what's impressive here is the lessons learned and again, closing the loop. And I think Sally said earlier, it's a way of continuously improving and dealing with complaints in that way. And the numbers are really small, as it says in the report, and especially the number 2 upheld complaints by the Ombudsman. So other councils are reporting at the same time. And I looked at County Council, and obviously in a year and a half's time, all this is going to be done by the Unitary Authority, and I really hope the Unitary Authority take the approach that this council takes rather than County Council approach. They had 104 upheld complaints by the Ombudsman in the same time, and they gave themselves a big pat on the back because it wasn't quite as awful as the year before. And they don't go through each one. It's probably too many to say what the lessons learned are, and it just seems like they're missing this opportunity. So I really hope that when we move to the unitaries, we follow this approach. And I'll finish with a question. So Surrey County Council had to pay £500,000 nearly in, I think they call it financial redress, mostly because of SEN, special educational needs issues. So just to confirm, I didn't see it in the report, did this council have to pay any financial redress because of Ombudsman complaints upheld? Thank you.
That's a shaking of a head.
No, sorry, we didn't have to pay any compensation as a result of our complaints handling.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just picking up on your point there, Councillor Wilson, as a councillor, when I report stuff, because I've had a number before, I report it to an officer that I know does it, and they send me an email to tell me they've done it. But it's actually a very valid point. If you're reporting it as a resident and it's not on your doorstep, it would be nice to get an email to say the fly tipping has been collected. Is that something that could be it doesn't sound like it's a rocket science, because if an inquiry's come in, then it's all done on a computer, I assume.
Thank you, Chair.
That's right.
It's not rocket science, you are right, but unfortunately, because of the nature of our contract, it's not something that we can do by way of improvement at the moment. It has been taken on board, Councillor Wilson. There are a number of things in terms of lessons learned that we have spoken to JWS about, and they are helping to inform the re-procurement of the joint waste contract across the 4 authorities. And things like this and feedback loops are quite critical because throughout the duration of the contract, it's been a recurring theme. And there are 2 challenges. One is you report a fly tip, it's collected, but you're not told. The other one is you report a fly tip, it doesn't happen to be on land we're responsible for, you're not told that's the case, and therefore it remains there. And you feel as though your complaint or hasn't been considered properly. So unfortunately, it's not something that we can fix within the term of this current contract, despite us constantly asking our contractor, but it will be resolved within the new terms of the new contract.
Yeah, that's good to know. I think it would improve residents' opinions of the service. Thanks.
Because actually, following on from your point, if it doesn't get collected, it's our fault, and we may get the complaint, I'm guessing. And yeah, okay. Okay, Councillor Nurmalkang.
Thank you, Chair. This is a sort of general question. Obviously, the aim is to reduce the number of complaints that we get. I just want to know how many complaints actually originate from the complainant misunderstanding, say, the website in terms of wording. Words like may or will make a big difference, and whether we should be constantly updating our website to ensure there's no ambiguity, and therefore are we learning lessons in that how, we as officers, we may use a certain language, but are the complainants interpreting your interpretation in a similar way?
Skipping.
I'm happy to come back on that. So firstly, our website, we work very hard to make sure that the language is accessible as possible. So our comms team go through the language on the website on a regular basis to make sure it's accessible, easy to understand, clear, and so on. Obviously, also heads of service also own their own web pages, if you like, and are responsible for making sure the information on there is relevant, up to date, easy to understand, and so on. I'm not aware, although I'm looking at Mrs. Smith for shaking or nodding, that we have had any complaints directly relating to website language as such. Most of our complaints tend to be a dispute about interpretation of policy, whether that's council tax policy, housing policy, or so on. Mrs. Smith, were there any complaints specifically about website wording?
We have had no complaints whatsoever, either formal or informal complaints about website wording. Often we'll have inquiries where people are seeking to understand how a particular policy relates to them, how they should interpret it, how they should manage within it, and we will explain that. But we have not had any formal concerns or complaints regarding anything to do with the website wording at all. The only thing I would say is we actually encourage complaints. We find them very healthy to make it very easy for people to complain. So we're not frightened of them. We're not worried about the numbers. We would be worried if we weren't resolving them, or if we were seeing an increase or a particular trend in something that we weren't doing particularly well, or that it wasn't meeting the customer or the resident's needs. I'm very happy to report that that is absolutely not the case at all.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
Just to follow up, I do know of a case, and maybe not in this particular, where there was a misinterpretation of the word may or will apply, and obviously may means that it's discretionary, whether it's maybe applying a particular set of rules, but the complainant used that in a way to compare our wording with, say, another council, a local council, and it was the complainant's actual interpretation that made her in a way, complaint. And if the word was will apply, it would have possibly eliminated that complaint.
Can I ask, has this complaint actually been given to this council, or is it just so it's something that's already gone through? Okay. Maybe without going into specifics, it might be something to be taken offline then. But is that okay? Because obviously I don't want to get into specifics here. Is that okay? Can I get Councillor Kang to maybe contact one of you direct? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we'd welcome that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I could say that we did have one individual who took issue with the wording, and it was my wording actually, on a response that said you may expect to have an answer to your complaint within 10 working days. I think it was 10 at the time. And they said they would prefer the words you will receive a response, and that was changed within the hour. But that was not a formal complaint raised, but it was feedback that we were given. I don't know if that's the one that you're alluding to, but no formal complaints.
I think we'll take this offline. It's not that one I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. So some of mine are observations rather than questions, but I do also have some questions. So my first observation is that we say within the report that the majority of contacts, when they're more serious, are through telephone or written contacts, and we therefore congratulate ourselves on having a very low percentage. However, we include in our contacts calls about the theatre. So unless people are ringing to complain about the fact the seats are too hot, too cold, too soft, I think it would be helpful to know how many contacts we received excluding anything to do with the theatre, because the theatre's got nothing to do with the services that we offer as a council. I appreciate we may take calls about a theatre. I did feel that to say that was a little bit spurious. I love statistics. The other question that I wanted to raise was on page 15. There was a case that was ultimately upheld by the LGSCO, relating to the notification of householders relating to a planning inquiry. And I know that in the past, our previous head of planning had talked and had a discussion about no longer sending out letters to householders that might be affected by an application. So I just wanted to have clarity, and I appreciate it's linked to, but we may not be able to get a response to that in this call.
Before you go on, that was a question I asked at the chair's briefing. So I warned them if no one else asked it, I would be asking it.
Okay.
So you beat me to it.
Okay, good to know. But once I'm ahead of you, Sean. But basically, has this decision impacted on that idea, and can our residents be reassured that they will be contacted moving forward? And then just relating to the numbers on page 30, before we run away, I think we do really well. I mean, we've had basically one complaint per 6,961 residents, according to the last survey. However, Elmbridge looks really, really high, and that was 6,940. Guildford is not doing so well. Runnymede, however, have got 1 in 11,000 residents have made a complaint. And just in relation to Councillor Wilson's comment earlier, that's in county councillors 1 per 4,281 residents. So actually, when you compare the number of residents to the number of complaints, there does seem, with the exclusion of Runnymede, to be much of a muchness. And can I have confirmation, please, that we have only received, and I appreciate the content is in this report, but they're not in the figures, that we have in the last year only had 2 stage 3 complaints, because certainly in the previous year that was an awful lot higher. So am I right that we've only had 2 in the last year?
Okay, so...
Shall I answer that?
Yes,
please. Yes.
Our difficulty is, in answer to your stage 2, stage 3 volumes, that when we changed the policy to meet the suggestions and recommendations of the LGO, we went from 3 stages to 2. So you would find within the stage 2 complaints would be the severity of those that would have previously been stage 3. So it's been split in the year. We had stage 3s at the beginning of the year. They would have become stage 2s in the second half of the year when the policy changed. So the volumes would be the same, but cases that would have naturally become a 3 would now be incorporated within the stage 2 in line with their recommendations.
I can see Councillor Willis' face, you can't. Do you want to just come back on that one?
Yeah, so we had 12 stage 3 complaints last time. I think just so that we are comparing eggs with eggs, it would be useful to, not now, but to have further clarity on how many of our stage 2 complaints would actually be counted as stage 3, because I'm a little bit nervous that we are comparing a stage 2 of 23 last time. We had 12 stage 3, so I would like to know whether we've got more or less serious complaints in comparison to the previous year. I'm not expecting an answer now, but if we could maybe have some clarity back to this committee, that would be helpful, unless you've got absolute clarity now.
I would if I scooted through all my papers, but I think so that I give you a better response, I'll put something together for you. But simply put, you can probably take the majority of the numbers at stage 2 as being equal to the stage 3s from before, but it isn't quite that clear cut, and I'll certainly put that together for you.
Thank you. If that could come out to everybody that would on the committee, that'd be really helpful.
Of course.
So that was that one. Was the planning question?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the planning question if that would be helpful. As you say, Chair, you did warn us about that. Myself and the Chief Executive did discuss that with the Head of Built Environment. Our understanding of the complaint itself is that it was a failure of our existing process, in that our agreed process at the moment, as you both are aware, is to send out a letter, and that this particular complaint, the process we couldn't prove the process had happened exactly as we had said it would do in our existing procedures and policies. In terms of whether that will affect a decision in the future about the way we manage neighbourhood letters, I'm sure the Chief Executive can give a bit more detail on that. But this complaint wouldn't really affect that, because the complaint is about the failure of process. Were we to stop doing neighbourhood letters, that would then be our agreed process at that point. And so we would follow whatever that process was. So just to summarise, the complaint was upheld, as I understand it, due to a failure in the process. If we changed the process, obviously if we failed in that process, then complaints would go on to be upheld. But this complaint wouldn't affect that decision, and I think it's quite important for me to say that. And I'll hand over now to the Chief Executive, as I'm sure he may want to add a bit more detail onto that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Kipping. Sorry, Sally. As Sally said, the current procedure, and the one at the time of this complaint, was that we would send a neighbour notification letter, as we classify it, and also a site notice would be affixed adjacent to the site application in a fairly visible place. And the statement of community involvement is the document which we are obliged to adhere to in terms of how we inform residents of planning applications. And the SCI, to use the acronym, effectively says we could do either or. So we can send a neighbour letter or affix a site notice. We don't actually have to do both, but the common practice within the planning department is that we do both. However, the proposal is that we change that. We will dispense with neighbour letters and rely on site notices. The learning from this particular complaint is that clearly we failed to follow our own process. And that was a fundamental challenge. We very quickly acknowledged that a failure had occurred and apologised to the property owner. who very firmly felt, and I have to agree, that they had lost their opportunity to object to a planning application. Whether or not that objection would have had any influence on the outcome of the application, I can't say. But in essence, we didn't send the letter. As a consequence, they could not object. There was a question mark about whether a site notice was affixed or not, and we could not evidence that that was the case. So our process is following this complaint, and the learning from this complaint was that we now make sure that the officers take a photograph when they put those site notices in place or they conduct a site visit, so we have physical evidence that that's been done. That particular safeguard will remain in place when we dispense with neighbour letters, and actually we will expand upon that, so there'll be additional site notices and additional measures in place to make sure that residents see some very visible site notices around any application site. I do have a few bullets that the Head of Built Environment and Regulation has shared with me. So we will ensure guidance notes are available, and how-to videos are published on our website to guide residents through these changes. The changes will make the process of consulting residents simpler, more efficient and tailored to individual preferences, and it also aligns with the direction of the travel nationally, which focuses on digitalisation, the use of social media and other electronic interaction with residents. Due to the significant reduction in printing, there is also a benefit in relation to climate change. But the reason that this was within the transformation programme is because it's quite a labour-intensive process. There are printing costs and there is officer time. So there are savings associated with this change.
I'm going to come to you, but I'm going to say something off the... so I said I wasn't going to say anything on this, but I'm going to now because of what you just said there. We were discussing this briefly before the meeting, so it's a bugbear of mine. I've said it in this chamber before, and I'm going to say it again because it's being recorded. We, as a local council, when we're doing applications, we have to put something, because there's legislation, in the local paper. Now, I'm sure all of us in this room read the local papers, and I'm sure all the residents read the local papers, but it costs us money every time we put something in the paper, and we only have to do that because the legislation tells us we have to do that. What was that last point about digitalisation?
Indeed, it's a significant reduction to the impact of climate change. If we're not generating paper, then that makes an impact. So that's not a dig to the council because they're doing what they have to do, but it seems ludicrous that we are having to do that when we could actually use that money to make sure the resident... We're saving money by not sending out letters, but if we weren't putting out in the legislation, we could send out the letters and we'd still save ourselves money. That's my soapbox done. Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, David, that was just about to be attributed to you. So I'd just like to see the cost-benefit analysis that's being done on that, if possible, in terms of the officer time. If we have to do one or the other, so with site notice or notifying neighbours, it would be really good to see the cost-benefit analysis on that in terms of the cost of sending out a letter versus the officer time in visiting a site, finding a suitable location. I'm just thinking, and obviously I know my ward better than anyone else's ward, there are times when I have no idea how you're going to get a site notice up because there's not a lamppost, there's no lighting, there's not, there might be a neighbour who geographically would comply because they're round the back somewhere, but it's going to be really challenging to find somewhere to see that and particularly to make it noticeable. So if that could come at a later date, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Yeah, I know that work's been done. It was done whilst Mr. Shania was here, so we have a separation of the print costs and obviously the postage costs associated with that and the administrative time. In terms of the burden of putting site notices out, the officers should be there anyway conducting site visits, so it wouldn't be a duplication of effort. They would effectively apply or assign those site notices whilst they're out doing those site visits. I take the point about, you will have properties at the back of the development site. There needs to be site notices there as well. There should be. And as part of the officer's assessment, they should be walking the confines or the perimeter of the site to understand how much of an impact there could be on adjacent properties and adjacent residents. So I would fully expect them to be able to affix site notices while doing that and going into very deep consideration about the impacts of any proposed development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, so all these W's.
Thank you. I know it's confusing. I just have a quick question on that, and I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, But has the decision already been taken under when the executive approved the transformation programme? Has this decision to move to doing away with the neighbourhood letters, has that decision already been taken?
In essence, yes. It's a delegated decision. There's no change to the statement of community involvement. And as such, it's a decision that the officers could have made in isolation. However, we didn't. We ensured that we engaged with the executive extensively whilst we were considering the options for savings within the transformation programme. It was incorporated within the P&F report that came in front of this committee, and it also went back to executive as well within the update report for transformation. So it's had full sight. We've been completely transparent about it, and we wanted to ensure that we did that, so at least we had a level of councillor awareness and councillor engagement and input.
Great, thanks, that's understood. I think it's a good idea, obviously, as well, anyway. Thank you.
I know it turned into planning, but that's actually relevant because we could get a number of complaints because of this, so that I was happy to let that go. Has anyone else got any other questions? I haven't got another question, but what I would like to pick up on is the fact that we learn from our complaints, as you were saying. It's good to see that when we've lessons learned, as it says, it's good to see that where there has been an issue and it was maybe around staff, we've put training in place. Have we then put a plan in place for CPD moving forward to make sure any new staff or it's updated in areas where it may need to be changed?
Yes, absolutely. I can take that question, Chair. We have a training programme, and when we learn lessons from, for example, an equalities lesson that we did learn on a complaint in this report, we put that on the training programme and we make sure we pick it up with the department, and we also make sure that that was some Equalities Act training, which we have as part of our induction in any case. So we make sure that we repeat that training and that it is on our training programme. So yes, in short.
Thank you. Councillor Nirmal-Kang.
Just following on, how frequent is the training programme? How often do you update that information to the officers?
So the training programme is a rolling programme. It's updated all the time. When there's a complaint that has identified a particular learning need in a team, then we will pick that up with the team straight away and then make sure that it's added onto the training going forward as well, so that we do make sure it is resolved. So in that particular case, we picked it up with the team straight away. We then arranged some training that happened a few months later. It took us a little while to arrange some specific training, and now it is part of their regular training programme.
Thank you. I'm looking. There's no more questions. Thank you for the report. Very detailed, gives us lots of information. Hopefully we've had some lots of questions for you there. There's nothing else on this, so I don't know if you want to hang around for the work programme, but if you don't, you're more than welcome to leave. So thank you both for your time this evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that takes us on to, he says, because I've got to find it, the work programme, which, as I say, we've tweaked a fair bit from when you last saw it, and I'm happy to go into discussions about, obviously, this is what we've put together based on reducing, basically taking out the portfolio updates, but putting in deep dive items. These are ones that we did. What we did was where the portfolio update was, we've put in deep dive elements within where they were. But if there's other items that you, as a committee, feel that we would like to add, then please make us aware and we can consider them. If there's things that we've put in you're not happy with, we don't think we need, then obviously do that as well. So the floor is open. I was worried then, Councillor Wilson, you weren't going to say anything.
No, it's just, I'm sure you'll know the answer to this. It just feels like we haven't had a financial update for a while. Does that feel the same way to you?
We had one at the last meeting, although the portfolio holder wasn't here. We were trying to think. We had the, I can't remember what was, because I haven't got it before.
End of year finance.
Yeah, it was the end of year finance. Yeah, so we did. Yeah, so we did at the last meeting. There wasn't anything that. So basically, that for those agendas, I think I'm fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Exec, we didn't take anything out financially because they have to be in certain periods within the work programme. So we left those in, and we didn't take any of those out, if memory. So what's in the work programme is what it should be. So we left those in. I believe the last meeting, although we did have the call-in where there was financial at the last meeting, wasn't there? Actually, I've got the minutes here, haven't I?
Yeah.
Bear with me 1 second, because I'm pretty sure.
Just looking at the work programme, so there's a half-yearly financial report, and then there's Q3 financial monitoring report, and that's in March next year.
So the last
there isn't
meeting
a
we had
Q1, I don't think.
So the last meeting we had end-of-year finance and budget outturn.
Yeah, so that was the end of the last year. So is there going to be a Q1 financial report?
If there is, it's whatever's in here, because we literally haven't touched that. So it's whatever it normally is, unless something has been mislaid. Go on, Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we have. I'd look to Eddie here. I'm pretty sure we don't normally have a Q1 finance update because it doesn't really tell us anything meaningful.
Yeah, I can sort of add to that as well. So it's been the case for a few years now that we haven't had Q1 reports, simply because there isn't that much to report on. It was the case a while ago that we did have them, but it hasn't been for a year or two at least, I think.
Okay, no problem, thanks.
Okay. So it also overlaps with the end-of-year return as well. So what we can do, I mean, obviously, I know the 151 officer isn't on here tonight. If we have a conversation with them and see if there's something that if they've got something to report, then we can obviously bring it forward. I suppose it depends again on workload and what else is going on. As Mr. Scott says, we had not had one for a few years, although we used to have them. But if it's something that can come forward and we want to do it, then obviously we can do it.
Yeah, I mean, only if it's going to tell us something useful. If it's not going to be useful, then there's no point in doing it. And if we don't have the officer time available, then it wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah, so we've taken note of that, and we will certainly have a look at that. Is there anything else? Any other points reference the work programme? Yes, Councillor Whitcroft.
Got there in the end. I need longer arms. I'm going to show my ignorance here. If we're deep diving into portfolio, each portfolio, could somebody send me a reference as to where the latest portfolio profiles are, whether that's on the website or available somewhere else or whatever, please?
Yeah, so Mr. Scott will send out that to you. So I think the titles, actually no, they're not, are they? Oh yeah, so the housing needs social housing and temporary accommodation. No, actually that's the subject, isn't it? It's not the actual, yeah, okay. No, good point. Okay, so we've changed that so that obviously that's the deep dive on housing, because I suggested that we probably, and especially because I know Councillor Rowlands has brought up social housing, etc., and I think Councillor Quinn has as well. So I suggested that may be an area we would, if we're dropping the portfolio update, it would be handy to have that. So I left that one in. But no, we will get it out to people. So if there is anything else that you think of after the meeting, then obviously please come back to us. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. Comments have been made about the climate change strategy report not being brought to this meeting, and I just thought it was important to flag to members of the committee that there is a delay in the information coming forward, which means that that report can't be accelerated to today, for example, and that's why it's in the work programme at October.
That was one item that I think we moved a couple of times, and before I went away, it was one item that we were potentially going to have at this meeting, but I think you can probably update on that.
I can try, to the best of my recollection, which is very hazy these days. We did speak to the climate change manager to see if this could be brought forward to September, but unfortunately there was still some data he was waiting on to populate the report that he didn't have, and that was coming from an external party, and I cannot remember, Councillor Noble, which party that was. But he was adamant that he would receive it in time for October. So apologies, we tried to bring that forward, but sadly, because Cameron was waiting for data, we couldn't.
Sorry, I wasn't having a go. I was just explaining to other members the discussions that we'd had outside of this room.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. It was one of those things that actually was going to be here, but then obviously can't be, as you've highlighted. Councillor Mavagana.
No, thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I mean, I don't see any internal audit reports here. I mean, are we dropping that completely now because of the transformation program?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Malvaganam. No, they'll go to the Audit Standards and Risk Committee. The internal audit reports were actually on the last agenda there, and they'll be on the next agenda as well, later this month, I believe.
Thank you.
Any other questions, points, anything else? Okay, so we'll take away the finance one, Councillor Wilson. And if anything else comes, if you, after you leave this meeting, suddenly think, oh, actually, then please let us know. And if anything else comes up from our side, obviously we will add them in as well. If there's no other questions on that, we're done. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good rest.